Hi, this is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show, Honorable People, Honorable Nation. Hi, I'm glad you're with me today. Hopefully you know, that we're involved in a series that deals with solutions. Not the kind of solutions that you mix up and you put for your drink. The solution to the problems that we're facing in American society. Today's topic is going to be about security. How do we actually achieve security in a society like we have here in the United States? You know, it's a tragic thing to see people who have done most of the correct things in life. They've been secure, they've been taken care of, haven't been violently attacked, haven't really been exposed to that kind of situation. And all of a sudden, one day, they're going about their normal business and they're confronted by people who plan to harm them. And all of a sudden, that word security goes right down the drain. How do we become secure in our life? Certainly, most of us want to have certain possessions that allow us to be secure. As we grow into adults, we want to have a home. Even as children, we want to have a home that we can go to that we know is what we call secure. You know, the people that care about us, if we're sick or injured, they'll take care of us. They love us. And it's a tragic thing to see young people grow up in a household that doesn't have that. Many of you know my background. A significant portion is in the law enforcement area and some in the military and in business and those kinds of things. But it's mostly in that area of law enforcement and somewhat in the military, where you're exposed to situations in the military in foreign countries, perhaps, and you see how little security people have. Having been in Vietnam, to know that people feel some comfort because they have this little hut that they can call home. And their children come and go, but because they're in a war type of environment, no one's ever certain that they won't become the victim of one side or the other side that's fighting each other. I've mentioned in other programs how I've watched little kids without a stitch of clothes climb through a dump to look for a can that has a few beans that they might be able to eat. If that thought doesn't break your heart, you're probably not a human being that I think that you probably are. And we need to think about those things because those are realities around the world. And they happen even in the United States. We do many things to keep that from happening. But if young people don't have parents who will make sure that they have something to eat, that they can live in a clean, healthy environment. And I could describe some other things, but I'm not going to do that today. But in speaking engagements, when I have a little more time, I sometimes go into it. And it's literally tears your heart out. But then there's another kind of security, and that has to do with people intentionally harming us. Many of us think that they're going to be okay all of their life. They're going to be in an environment that people wouldn't want to harm them. Currently, we have a situation that happened in Florida where there was a shooting at a school. And I think the toll is 17 young people died and many others were injured. And that occurred because one young individual, a young man, made a decision that he was going to take this violent action for whatever reason he had. It appears as though maybe he was picked on, and we call it bullying. And most people don't realize, and they don't preach, that bullying is a fact of life. I don't like it, but you see it not only with young people, you see it with adults. I've seen adults that you wouldn't suspect this of kind of belittle someone who is on the street and asking for a handout without knowing the circumstances. I've seen it happen with law enforcement officers pushing their authority, belittling people, almost antagonizing them, wanting them to respond. Now, most police officers wouldn't do that. But we're talking about security here, and we have to understand that while we may have security in our life, most of the time, at any time, that can change. And it's at those times when it changes that we most need the ability to make sure that we're secure, to make sure that we come out of whatever situation it is and we're okay, that we don't come away winding up being an invalid for the rest of our lives, or not being able to see because we're struck in the head, not being able to walk or talk because that envelope of security was broken. And because we're about solutions, it's important to talk about those kinds of situations. Those situations when someone breaks into our school, breaks into our home, confronts us on the street. What do we do? How much thought have we given to that? The students down in the school in Florida, they're having, I guess you could call them protests. They're talking about what should be done in order to make them safer. People aren't going to like this, but because we're about the truth, and it's important to understand the truth, we need to ask questions in a situation like that and understand that situation is no different than many other situations that happen around the country every single day. Not necessarily in a shooting, but in the respect that when we become a victim, we cry out and we say, "Help us, why weren't you here? Why didn't you do something?" And if you ask those teachers and the students from that school what they did before that event to keep others from being harmed, you would probably get blank stares. Because the reality is, most of us don't think about these things when someone else is the victim. We don't say, we need to do something. What is the solution? Currently, we have the situation down there where young people who have very little experience in life, most of whom have probably never had their security threatened at all until that day, are coming up with solutions and telling adults, governmental agencies, that they need to pay attention and do what they want. In order to address the issue of security, you have to understand what reality is. Reality is harsh. It takes on a life of its own, and it's very hard to predict. But what we need to do is anticipate the possibilities that may happen to us and other people. And because we want to, now that we've been a victim, now we want to prevent this from happening again. We didn't address it before because we never thought we'd be that victim. We thought that we were secure. And so, we're forced into a situation where either we remain silent or we come out with some solution that we've given little or no thought to. That's what's happening now. Many people are coming up with solutions and saying, well, we have to raise the limit on gun possession. We have one individual. And if you want to look at the other shootings involved, you have several people that were under the age of 21 or 18. And because of that, they want to take all the 18-year-olds and tell them they're not responsible to have guns. Our mindset is backwards. We want people to be responsible. And part of teaching responsibility is letting people, even young people, know that they have a tremendous impact on the things that happen around them. They have the ability to decide in their life that they want to be a good person who helps other people and is prepared to help if something goes wrong. Part of that preparedness is to be able to handle an incident where somebody violates another individual and assaults them, tries to harm them with any number of things, whether it's their fists, a knife, a gun, a club. I often ask people, would it make much difference to you whether you were shot and you died or whether you were beaten to death with a baseball bat? And sometimes people look at that and they say, well, it probably would hurt less to be shot and then die than to be beaten to death by a baseball bat. And when we're talking about security, we have to look at the total package. How do I protect myself from the people who would harm me? Deliberately, intentionally. People are talking about guns in schools, and they're saying, oh, no, we don't want it. Kids are saying, oh, no, we don't want guns in our school. I would imagine in that situation, if there was a teacher or two that had firearms, that incident may never have occurred in the first place. Because that individual went to that school. So he might be aware that some teachers had the ability to fight back. But if he did anyway, at least that individual may be facing gunfire. And could somebody else be hit and injured? Certainly. I'm not a big fan of hiding in a corner and becoming a victim. And so if confronted, that individual may very quickly disappear. And many lives may have been saved. Maybe more would have been lost. We don't know. But the answer to me is never hiding in a corner, hoping that someone doesn't harm you. And why is that not my choice? Because life can be very difficult. We need to understand that it's our duty to defend innocent others. And if we learn the skill, this was in a high school. Those young men had the ability, they certainly, many of them probably had access to firearms. You know, if that man dropped one of his firearms, would anybody have the skill to be able to pick it up and use it? Firearms are a tool. They have the ability to keep us safe in the right hands. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the idea that you can keep someone from harming you by defending yourself or innocent others. And I often pose this question when people talk about firearms and they're saying people shouldn't have them. If we got rid of every single firearm in the whole country, do you think you would be safe? Or do you think you might be confronted by 4 or 6 individuals who have a club and a knife and a pipe and still intend to do the same thing to you that they would have done with a firearm? Bad people are bad for a reason. And they do bad things. And people of courage, people who refuse to be a helpless victim, learn what they can do in order to defend themselves. There are self-defense classes. Very seldom promoted, by the way. There are techniques that people can use, a number of things, anything from a stick to any kind of firearm. But the reality is, in those situations, you need something that can overpower the individual who is violating you and perhaps many others. So when I have the opportunity, and we consider the fact that if you were confronted by 4 or 6 individuals, what would you do? Most people would say, well, I'd try to run away. Well, if you're in a position where you can't, and oftentimes that's where you're met with those kinds of people, you don't have a way out. And my question to you is, and the students of the Florida high school, would you wish that either you had a firearm available in order to convince them that they should not continue their attack upon you or whoever you're with? Or, if you're not so inclined, would you wish that a good person with a firearm would come along and keep those individuals from hurting you? I think we all know the answer to that. And I think that answer would be every single one of us would want someone to come along if we didn't have a firearm and weren't able to use one properly. We would certainly want someone to come along, a good person, to step in and defend us. That individual might want to help, but is it a little too much for him to overcome this understanding that he may be risking his life? His children may not have a dad who can walk. You know, he might lose his eyesight or his life. But if that same individual had a firearm and knew what to do with it, the chances are very likely that that situation could end peaceably. It's very likely that those individuals would run away. You would be safe, he would be safe, and life would go on, and you could then become secure again. This war that we seem to have with firearms is mostly initiated by people who don't understand what they are. They're a tool to be used to help other people. People tell me they're against violence. I'm not against violence. I'm against bad violence. And I'm against bad violence because I understand there's good violence. If someone's attacking you and I get in there and I have to physically struggle with them, or I have to fire a gun or use a knife, or I have to shoot them, that's violence. But you're going to know that it's awful good violence. So what we want is we want to keep the bad people from using that violence against us. And in order to do that, before you get on this program of trying to convince other people that you should do away with so-called assault weapons, remember the shooting in Texas was stopped by a man who had what some people will call an assault weapon. If he didn't have that, would he still confront the individual? With that firepower of the gun that he had, he could pretty well be assured that he could put up a good fight against that person. And all of these situations are caused because people, for whatever reason they have, people like to call them crazy, maybe, I don't know. But I do know that your security depends upon whether you and the people around you have the ability to convince that individual or force that individual to not hurt you. So this is about security. It's about taking responsibility so that we can be secure and the people around us can be secure. So my suggestion is this, and I suppose you could say it's my solution. When we don't know about something, we'd probably all agree, if it's important, we should spend the time and learn about it. So for people who don't know about firearms, there are many opportunities. Go to a gun club. Ask them if they have classes. People have bashed the National Rifle Association without knowing the good that they do. They have condemned them because it appears as though they want people to have firearms. And many people think that's bad. But every single one of those people would say it was good if that firearm was used in order to save their life. And believe me, as a law enforcement officer, I know, and many of you know, there are many more situations than are publicly made known where individuals are mercilessly injured or killed by all kinds of things besides firearms. You can look up the statistics on that. But what a firearm does is it gives you the ability to pretty instantly keep bad things from happening. And so I suggest that you learn. Contact the National Rifle Association, of which I am not a member, by the way. And the only reason I'm not a member, and I'm considering becoming a member now, is they were never strong enough for me. Because they talked about people needing guns for hunting, when The real purpose to have them is for security, to be able to defend yourself and innocent others. You know, the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States is about security. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary, what? To the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so because you want security, the people have to have firearms. And because there might be a significant threat to the people, you need to have an organized militia, because when it's available, when you actually need it, you need to know that it's available and you're organized, you can trust the people who are involved in that militia. But the security, to be secure, demands that the people have the ability, the tools, to be able to make sure that good is done and bad is defeated. Consider this. You, the young people of Florida and around the country, those of you who know about firearms, let your friends know that in the right hands, they're a tool to keep us secure. Oftentimes, the best answer takes a little while to actually realize. The quick answer is not necessarily I'm getting a cue that we're running short of time here, so I'm going to wrap this up. That security is vital to you because you want to have a happy, healthy life, and you want your loved ones to have it as well. This is about security. It's really up to you. Don't count on someone else. Learn what you need to learn. This is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show. Honorable people, honorable nation, God bless you all, and I hope you have a safe and secure day.